I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We're bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders, busting myths, sharing stories, and staying connected when Canadians need it the most. We're having unexpected conversations for unprecedented times. Hi, you're listening to TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. On today's episode is all about maintaining health and wellness in a crisis. We're joined by Desiree Nielsen. Desiree is a respected registered dietitian, published author, and host of The Urban Vegetarian. She runs a successful nutrition practice and uses her platform to speak on a range of topics related to health and wellness. And I should note that Desiree and I are both at our own homes, practicing very good social distancing and trying to stay healthy with all of our kids. Welcome, Desiree.
Thank you so much.
So you have two kids, 9 and 4. You were saying when we were talking off air a second ago, you were saying that you're used to being in self-isolation. You work from home, you're self-employed, but you're not used to having your family around all the time. How's it going?
It's interesting. It's, particularly with kids, when you work from home, they're like, oh, you're home, so we can hang out now. We can do this and we can do that. You're like, no, I actually have to go and put in a work day. So I do feel, particularly in a small home, as many of us live in Vancouver, there's a lot of managing energies. So that's been interesting. We're getting outside as much as humanly possible. But I think we're all sort of in this together, right? We're all just trying to figure out a new way to maintain some sort of sense of normalcy and schedules and happiness. And yeah, we're learning this as we go along for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of schedules, food is really scheduled in a child's life, in all of our lives. We know, breakfast, snacks, lunch, dinner, whatever it might be. Things have really changed. And what I've noticed in our house is kids are constantly going to a cupboard looking for something to snack on. And I've tried to explain that, yes, we have some snacks here, but I'm trying to make them last for how long, I don't know.
Yeah.
So let's not eat all the snacks at the same time. And eating healthy is a challenge too. So what are some tips you can give us of let's talk about our kids first, kids in general. How do we keep our kids healthy?
Yeah. So I agree that it's kids, but also it's adults. We sort of were looking to fill the void, and we've learned to do that in our society through eating. Eating is as much fuel as it is sort of like a pastime. And for our kids, I think, we're not heavily scheduled at home, but keeping some semblance of we wake up, we have a good breakfast, lunch is going to be around noon, dinner's going to be around 6:00, and still keeping that cadence to their lives is really important. Just for our mental well-being. But in terms of keeping them healthy, I think it's important also to remind them, what is a healthy snack? This is a great opportunity to educate them on why it's so important to eat healthy. Our immune systems, in order to stay strong, we need those basics. We need those fruits. We need those vegetables. We need to get some protein in. And so this is a great opportunity to say, well, hey, you ate this for a snack before. You had some nuts, you had some crackers. So now we're looking for a fruit or a vegetable. Let's choose a fruit or a vegetable and give them the opportunity to understand that we need a variety of foods every single day in order to keep our bodies really strong and healthy.
Okay. And so what if we're seeing all major cities around the world on lockdown. If that happens here, which it probably will, what if we can't get fresh fruit and vegetables?
Yeah.
What if we, where are we at then with all of us, our families?
Yeah. So I think in a time like this, which is totally unprecedented, we're all just doing the best that we can. What I find really interesting, at least here in Vancouver, is that it is the fruits and vegetables that are in large supply. We're seeing things like pasta or canned goods fly off the shelves. But if you go to the produce section, no one's buying fresh fruits or vegetables. And actually right now is a wonderful time. If you have access to grocery delivery, you're still getting out to the grocery store to buy those fresh fruits or vegetables and freeze them. Freeze them for later, because it's actually really hard to get your hands on frozen fruits and vegetables. But right now you can buy fresh and freeze them. But should we get to that point where we aren't able to do our grocery shopping, where we're not seeing those fresh fruits or vegetables, I think the most important thing is to remember that if we're relying on staples as opposed to prepared foods, so if you are buying beans, dried beans, and soaking them yourselves, as opposed to buying like a canned vegetable soup, if you are eating some pasta or making a sauce with canned tomatoes, these are still really simple, nourishing, wholesome foods. And particularly here on the West Coast, we're really wellness focused. And, people are having their green smoothies every day and all of their supplements. These are not the basics that are required to actually nourish your body. It's about getting some grains in. It's about getting those proteins in however you can and keeping your food inherently simple. And that will be enough to nourish our bodies. And we have to remember that we're a very affluent society and we have a lot of privileges around our food supply. And yet, in many places in the world, they keep their bodies nourished and healthy on far simpler foodstuffs. There's a reason why rice and beans has sustained multiple societies around the world for literally hundreds of years. And here in Canada, we just might need to be a little bit more humble and realize that all this fancy stuff we typically enjoy is fun, but it's not necessary. So we will be okay and we will be well nourished.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I love my lentils and I love my beans and I always have dried ones and, people laugh at me sometimes for it, but it's the easiest way to be healthy. I don't eat meat. A lot of people don't eat meat. What do people who might not have access to all of the, as you said, we're so affluent, right? We can get our nut cheeses and all of those things. Those things are pretty well not going to happen. What about somebody worried about their nutrition who maybe, is on a different diet than most?
Yeah. So, for all of us who are familiar with plant-based eating, I think now is going to be a little bit easier for us to adapt than perhaps people who have a more traditional style with meat getting harder to get. For those people who are on a different diet, like a gluten-free diet, or for people who don't have the income to necessarily get the types of foods that are available, that becomes more challenging. And something that I'm doing personally is trying to support the food bank, because the food bank is going to become increasingly important in a time like this to help support people in our community who don't have the same affluence and access to foods that other families do. But if you should be on like a gluten-free diet, or if you have diabetes and the types of foods available, buying white flour and making bread isn't going to be a great idea for you because it's going to throw your blood sugars off. To do whatever you can to connect to the right food supply, even if it's talking to your neighbors and talking to your community. If you are immunocompromised and can't leave the house, do you have a neighbor who could go out to a couple of grocery stores for you to find the food that you need? Particularly because what I'm noticing right now is that the online food delivery, while it is available, it's getting a little bit harder to access because the websites are just overwhelmed. So leaning on your community in order to get those foods made. Likewise, if you have elderly neighbors, if you have neighbors who are having a hard time getting out of the house, what can you do? Can you make some banana bread for them? Can you make a soup or a chili and then drop it at their door for them to help them stay nourished? And I think this is a great time to remember how fundamental food is to life and how it has the opportunity to connect us all by just doing a little bit for your community.
Really good points, Desiree. And I think it's, important to bring our kids into that process also, explaining that while our cupboards may have lots of food in them, there are people that don't have the same access to healthy food. And so you mentioned the food bank. I know that money is always a good way to help a food bank. It's not about just going to your own cupboard anymore and getting some cans and bringing it to them, because they can buy so much more with money. So I'm sure there's many online ways that if anyone's listening and want to support their food bank, they can do that. What about our immune systems? Stress, we know that stress is not good for our immune system. So what are some things we can do to help boost it?
So what's interesting with this current pandemic is that we aren't aware. I mean, we're barely aware of what this virus is, and we're learning every single day more and more about this virus. So our traditional means of, here's some foods, here's some nutrients that are really important in the normal cold and flu season, we can't say for certain if they're going to help boost our defenses. But from a general perspective, nutrition is nutrition, stress reduction, sleep, and movement are four of the absolute fundamentals for supporting your immune system. With decreased schedules, this is a great time to get more sleep. More of us have that opportunity than we perhaps did before. From a nutrition perspective, it's really about when you have access, eating those fruits and vegetables. It's probably one of the most potent things that you can do. The other thing, which is a challenge, which maybe we can talk about when we're comfort eating, as is wont to happen right now, sugar and alcohol are two of the things that can diminish our immune defenses, which if you're having a glass of wine is probably not a big deal. But if you find that you're reaching for sweets, for hyper-processed snacks, for alcohol more as a coping mechanism, it's something that needs to be looked at too, and particularly if you have some sort of chronic disease or already your immune system isn't extremely strong, to try and look for healthy alternatives so that you're not reaching out for those options as often.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a little bit about maybe self-soothing, things that we can do to, because I know there's a difference between self-care and self-soothing, right? So, things like self-soothing might be, I don't know, painting each other's nails, that's self-soothing, or taking a long hot bath or something like that. What are some other things that we can do to, release our stress or calm our stress, our anxieties?
Yeah. So, at this time, like, especially even in my family, getting outside is huge for us, getting off of our screens. I do a lot of work in my normal practice with sort of that gut brain connection, and we greatly underestimate how time spent on a screen increases our anxiety and what that does to our stress levels, our cortisol levels, and that has a negative effect on our immune system. We've also very much learned to self-soothe with food, which, can be appropriate. And I think in a time like this, we can't be so hard on ourselves that we're like, oh, wow, I really just wanted to drink wine and eat popcorn last night. And that's going to be okay sometimes. But if it's becoming 4 or 5 times a day, what can you do?
That's right. That is my weakness, wine and popcorn. So not every night is what you're saying?
No, yeah, not every night. And even if it is every night, maybe this is the opportunity to say, okay, so what do I really need? Like, do you need to have a wine date then over Skype with your girlfriends? Like, do you need that social support? Can you even have a dinner date? Like, all of my dinner dates have been canceled for the foreseeable future. Can you cook together with a friend or family member and then actually sit down and eat that meal looking at each other on a screen? Do you need a bath? Like, do you love baths? Do you just need the ritual of sort of preparing something? So if you really want a cookie, why don't you bake that cookie? In the 20 to 40 minutes it's going to take you to bake, that's going to reduce your stress so that by the time you eat that cookie, you might have 1 or 2 and feel really nourished and really grounded, as opposed to if you open up a box of cookies and eat half the box and sort of not feel that soothing you were reaching for. Food has the opportunity to sort of like elevate your serotonin levels, but also help you feel really grounded. And so we need to honor that, but also make sure that we're keeping it within the context of a really healthy, mindful approach for how we're taking care of ourselves right now, because it's important.
I think a big challenge for most people is boredom, and not even recognizing that we are bored. We're not used to being in our home. We've been home for about a week now.
Yeah.
And like you said, I'm used to being home. I'm not used to having everybody home, and they're not used to being home, right? They're used to being out in the world and doing things, their activities and school. Boredom. What are some great ways with, whether it be with self-care or self-soothing or with nutrition, that we can get out of our boredom?
Yeah. And the one thing that I'm finding too, as we become more screen attached, the boredom happens faster. I think, back in the old days before our smartphones, I don't think we'd get bored until we've been doing something by ourselves at home for like hours. Now it seems like minutes. So this is a really great time to take up a project. One of the things that I'm noticing is that online, there are so many free resources now. So if you're really bored, there are incredible workouts that you can do at almost any hour of the day for free on Instagram that people are just giving away. Now is the time for that project you've been meaning to do. I used to knit, and it's the world's most time-consuming habit, so I pretty much gave it up. Now's the perfect time. If you're going to pick up those knitting needles and try a new skill like that, anything to sort of get you into a rhythm, get those hands busy. Even cooking, I've been finding a lot of grounding and solace in really cooking. So if you don't typically have the time to make anything more than a 10 or 15 minute meal, maybe you've always wanted to know how to make macarons. Maybe this is the time if you can get your hands on some flour, on some sugar, to actually get into a super intense baking project and learn a completely new skill.
Just don't eat those macarons every day.
Just share them. Drop them at your neighbor's doorsteps.
Just because you make it doesn't mean you have to eat them all.
It's true.
You don't have to eat them all. Okay, this is excellent information, and let's just go back one more time to we don't need it's just about being nutritious, eating the right foods. We probably need less than we think we do, don't we?
Human nutrition is far simpler than we expect. So if you are eating single ingredient whole foods most of the time, even if that's just brown rice for days, you're being well nourished. It's also important to know that the human body is far more resilient than we give it credit for. So yeah, if you want to have a popcorn and wine night a couple nights a week, it's probably not going to hurt you. The key is just to be really mindful, really aware of your habits, understand when you're constantly reaching for things that are not as nourishing in order to self-soothe, when there could be a healthier opportunity, like spending face time with a friend, getting outside, taking a bath, even making a cup of tea. So it's about finding that new balance, because we're in an unprecedented time, finding that new balance between self-care and self-soothing, between effort and just surrender, and doing what we need and supporting each other.
Yeah. And I think that, you're right. We will get through this together. But I think that, the interesting thing for me, and we've seen this with, people, we've seen on the news, people going and hoarding things and it makes us all want to do it, right? Because then it sets panic in all of us. But I think our biggest panic comes from food. And there's two things here. One, people are scared they're not going to have access to food and they are going to starve. And then we have a large portion of our community who are already living in poverty and don't have access to food regularly. So there's a lot going on, and mentally with food, and maybe not so much nutrition. People aren't worried about; they're just worried about having food and having access to lots of it. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I can. I find it interesting as a dietitian, because I think we do talk a lot about nutrition and nutrients, and we forget the role that food plays in our everyday lives. It is comfort, it is culture, it is connection. And right now, one of our biggest challenges when we're not facing a time like this is that we're constantly bombarded by messaging to eat. We're constantly marketed to. There are coffee shops like 5 a block. We're told consume, consume, consume. And I have clients who it's an honest fear for them. They're fearful of being hungry in a normal day when there is plenty in their cupboard. And so I think it dysregulates our relationship with food on a normal level. And when we're in more of a crisis situation like we are now, it heightens all of those emotions. It heightens that disconnect in our normal relationship with food. So it's a difficult time emotionally for so many reasons. But I think if food is that trigger for you, if you have fear about having enough, if you have fear about feeling emotions that you typically soothe or numb out with food, these things are going to be heightened for you. And now is the time to reach out to friends, to reach out to family, to reach out to a counselor who, hopefully you have access to virtually at this point. Because food is plentiful and available. If we are fortunate enough to afford it right now, our supply chains are strong. And perhaps for you, one of the solutions is to see how you can give back, to order food online to send to the food bank. A restaurant in my neighborhood right now has been opening up because they're not serving food, they're serving staff meal. It's $5 to $10, and you can actually order it online to be donated to someone in need. So in order to sort of get out of our own heads and start looking to the community and how we can be of service, that might actually be really helpful in terms of moderating that relationship with food and our place in the food supply and food's role in our lives.
That really, that hits home. That makes a lot of sense. So just before we wrap up, Desiree, how about some specific immune boosting foods that we can, put on our mental list of eating?
So right now, it's really important to keep our fiber intake up. Super boring for a dietitian to talk about fiber, but fiber supports your gut microbiome, and that's a really important part of keeping your immune system calm. So those staples, the brown rice, the wheat berries, the chickpeas, the black beans, eating those basic high fiber plant foods are going to be really supportive. While you have access, and as long as you can maintain access, trying to put something colorful into your life, like whatever you can get, broccoli, carrots, even onions and garlic. And a lot of these are long storage foods that you can keep in the refrigerator or even in like your cool basement if you have one. Eating as many fruits and vegetables as you can will really help keep those anti-inflammatory phytochemicals in your system that are going to support immunity. And then burn it out with as much garlic and ginger as you can get your hands on.
Great advice. Desiree, thank you so much. Really appreciate talking to you. You have a lot of information to share, and I know everyone can find you online. So again, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Stay well.
I'd like to thank Desiree for sharing her time and advice with us today here on TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Join us each week as we speak to a wide variety of guests to help support Canadians during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're in this together. Stay well.